Wow, it's great to be here again. Did you know that nearly 60% of all college students across the country have no idea how to interview? That was documented in a recent study by McGraw-Hill. Think about this for a second. If tomorrow an interview for your dream job were to fall in your lap, the majority of the people in this audience would have that slip right through their fingers. That is a tragic mistake. And how do I know that? Because I made that mistake when I was here at school. I was in my senior year, and I had networked countless hours to get a job on Wall Street. And I was a huge underdog, not coming from an Ivy League school. But I learned through trial and error a very unique approach to networking. I discovered that by conducting informational interviews, I could not only learn how to break into an industry, but I could also create my own screening interview that, if conducted well, could lead to an official interview. That was an incredible insight for me. And I talked about that insight at this very conference several years ago. It was the first P2B conference. Well, where I left off on my first speech talking about networking, I want to pick back up and talk about interviewing to complete the package. But there's an important distinction. The purpose of networking is just to get you an interview, and it's ultimately the interview that gets you the job. I didn't understand when I was back here at school how those two skills work together, but this is how it played out. So after spending countless hours networking, I flew out to New York City for the first time in my life. I was scared to death. I had succeeded in lining up my first official interview with JP Morgan, and I'll never forget it. It was on just outside Times Square on Park Avenue, and I walked up and I went in the building, and it was 50 stories high, and I remember my heart was just pounding. And I thought to myself, it all comes down to this. If I can perform in this one interview, I could actually work here and my dream would become a reality. The HR manager came, she pulled me in a room, she asked me a series of questions, and I answered them the very best I could. And you'll never believe what happened. I utterly botched the interview, and I saw the whole thing slip through my fingers. If you saw my first speech, you know that I got a second shot at this. So I returned back to BYU, Idaho, and I had one objective. I have got to master interviewing. My oldest brother is really good at selling himself, so I sat down with him for several hours. And as I learned different techniques and principles, the broader strategy of how to interview became clear in my mind. So I practiced, and with that came confidence. I flew back out a second time and succeeded in lining up several interviews. Only this time, I was playing to win. Interview after interview, I knocked them dead, and at the end of that week, I had a few offers. It was an amazing feeling. But this begs the question, what was different? I was the same individual as a month earlier. Even though I was going against Ivy Leaguers who had great financial experience, I sold myself in a way that I was chosen over them. I've seen over and over in my career that it's not the person with the most experience that gets the job, but rather whoever interviews the best. Interviewing is a strategy, and you can learn it. And I want to talk to you about that strategy right now. Are you ready to jump in? So, I have more content to go through than I do time, so I'm going to move very quickly, and this may be difficult to absorb, but they're going to post this video online in the next day or two, and you can go back and review it if you need to. First, I'm going to go through a skeleton, then I'm going to come back through, and with a case study, I'm going to add some details to that. First, everything starts with requirements. What are the most important skills and attributes for the job? You can get that from the job description. You can get it through conducting informational interviews. You might get it by doing research online or just sitting down and thinking it through. But you're going to come up with 4 requirements. Why 4? Because like any marketing campaign, you want to have a targeted message. If you say too much, you say nothing. And with each of those requirements, you're going to identify similar skills that are related, and you're going to group them together in a theme. So when you're done, you're going to have 4 themes. Second, you're going to go through each experience on your resume, and you're going to link it to one or more of these themes. The question you're answering yourself is there anything from my experience that can demonstrate this group of skills or this theme? Third, you are then going to share a story that illustrates that group of skills in action, following what I made up called the PART formula, P-A-R-T. It stands for problem, action, result, takeaway. Problem. Every good story starts with a good problem statement or an objective or some kind of conflict or even a remit that was given to you. The biggest mistake I see is that people omit the problem and they go right into the actions, or they take too long to set it up. Just take a sentence or two. Action. How did you overcome that problem? Stay high level. Don't get in too much detail. Results. To the extent possible, you want to quantify what you accomplished. It's not always possible, but when you can, put some numbers to it. And finally, the takeaway. The number one reason why people bomb a good story is because they don't know how to connect the dots and link it back to one of the 4 themes. And quite frankly, that's why they botch the whole interview altogether. In other words, you do not want the interviewer to infer what the takeaway is. You tell them. You draw a cause and effect relationship and say, and this is why I was successful. So you have a strong takeaway at the end. So that's the skeleton. Let's go through it now with a live case study. So here's the scenario. You're a senior here at BYU Idaho, and you want to rise up in leadership roles in a company, and you found the first role you really want to jump into, and it's a supervisor over a customer service center at the local company Melaleuca. Now, why did I choose that? I don't know. I made it up. But it doesn't really matter, because the same principle applies if you're a nurse and you want to get into a hospital, or a teacher and you want to get into a school, or you're an analyst and you want to break into Wall Street. So here's how it works. Like we talked about, we're going to go and identify the first major requirements for this job. So because this is a supervisor role, we're clearly going to be managing people, and we're going to have to oversee their efforts. So the first skill that we're going to go up with is management skills. And as we think about what that is, what are some of those similar skills that we group together? This is things like performance evaluations, training employees, building the team. And you can come up with more, but we're going to come up with a lot of similar skills, and so we've got this theme of management skills. Second, you're now in a customer service center. So clearly, you've got to have really good customer service skills. And this is things like good phone etiquette and being able to create a great experience and having interpersonal skills. So you'll come up with others, but you'll have this theme of customer service. Next, it's very similar, and it's similar and related, but communication skills. This is going to be more like not just verbal, but written skills where you're logging the calls and you're having to process orders and returns. And so we'll make that a key theme. And then lastly, the number one reason why people call customer service is because they have problems. So you got to be able to show that you can take initiative, resolve issues and problems that you haven't confronted before. And so we have this last problem solving. So these are our 4 themes. Now we move to the second step. What I did was I reached out to career services here at BYU Idaho, and they sent me a random resume of a student that's here at BYU Idaho now. You can't see it, it's intentionally blurred. And they stripped away all personal information, but this is the experience that this individual has. First, this person was a produce specialist at Brolam's grocery store. Second, this person was a landscape tradesman providing lawn and garden services, but also overseeing the efforts of 10 hourly employees. Next was a career prep mentor here at BYU Idaho, and finally this person served an LDS mission. Here's the great thing about this. This is an awkward fit. This is not a resume you would look and say, you should definitely apply for this job. I mean, on a scale from 1 to 10, I don't know where I'd rank it, but it would be somewhere near the bottom. But this is where it gets interesting. So the second step is where we're going to connect it to the themes. We've got our produce specialist at Brolum's. Where are we going to link that to? Well, certainly we could put it to customer service, where we know that we're going to be interacting with customers and resolving their issues and that type of stuff. We look at the other ones, and where else does it fit? I think problem solving is a good one. You've got stock out issues and frustrated customers, and so we've linked it to a couple of our themes. Let's go to the landscape tradesman. Well, since we're overseeing hourly employees, certainly we can put it under the management skills. That's a good fit, having to train and onboard and everything like that. It can fit the customer service to the extent that you were interacting with the homeowner. And problem solving is a great one, because if you've ever worked in this type of business, which I have, equipment breaks down, sprinklers break, a lot of kind of stuff happens, and you got to be able to fix that and solve problems. Career prep mentor. There's maybe a few of these you could contact to, or link it to, but the obvious one is communication skills, where you're helping prepare a resume and you're teaching them how to interview. And then finally, the LDS mission. The great thing about this, honestly, this is like the Holy Grail. There's almost no experience that you can't link this to. It's such a phenomenal experience, and you can find stories to illustrate any one of these themes or these requirements. So we've linked them all. Now the next step, everywhere where we've seen an arrow, we now have to identify a story, and we got to be able to share that story in order to sell that theme. And so let's role play for a second. So let's suppose the interviewer asks you and says, okay, I see that you have really good experience. I'm just not sure this is relevant for the job. Can you talk to me a little bit about your candidacy? Pause. Don't jump in yet, and think to yourself, what do I want to sell? I'm going to go with the customer service theme. Okay, what is the story and the experience that I want to share in order to illustrate that? You come up with an idea, and you might answer something like this. I can see how my experience may not seem relevant, but as I look deeper into what's made me successful, I actually see some common threads. For example, when I was a produce specialist at Brolum's, we actually faced steep competition from Walmart and from Albertsons. And the way we differentiated ourselves was with our high guest service levels. Well, I was tasked with the responsibility of continuously improving the service in our produce section. And what I noticed was that I was the face of the organization. The experience that customers had was largely dependent on their interactions with me and whether or not they wanted to come back and shop here again or go somewhere else. So I looked for ways to improve the service. I noticed a trend that there was heavy times when we had customers and there was light times, and these were consistent. And during the light times, I would go and make sure all my shelves were stocked. I would go in the back room and prepare everything and unpackage it and get it ready so that during the heavy times, I was able to spend quality time with the customers. I interacted with them and showed them around, and we would talk about recipes. I was able to create an amazing experience. And over the 8 months that I was at Brolum, every single month I was there, we grew in the produce section, and at the end of this, I was awarded Employee of the Month for my customer service skills. This was a big success, but here's why I excelled. It was because of my customer service skills in realizing how to interact and create a great experience, but also my problem-solving skills in taking initiative and figuring out ways to free up time so I could create more value. I know at Melaleuca you are looking to build a really good customer service department. I built a top-notch one here. I know how to do it. This is a strength. I did it at Brolum's, and I can do it for you. Now, here's the thing. When you're done, you pause and stare, and you hit a power punch. This is true. And so think about this for a second. I mean, this is crazy. What did we just do? We took an experience that was completely unrelated, that was a horrible fit, and all of a sudden, we found a transferable skill that made us really valuable for this job we were interviewing for. Let's talk about the PART formula. What was the problem? We had to give a little context in talking about the competition, but the problem was I was given the remit to continually improve the customer service. What were the actions? Well, In the slow times, I was stocking my shelves, and in the heavy times, I was interacting with customers and creating a quality experience. What was the results? We grew every single month I was there, and at the end, I was awarded Employee of the Month. And the takeaway, you're looking to build a top-notch department, and I've done that before. I know how to create a great experience. I did it for Brolums, and I can do it for you. And that's it. That is the formula. This is how it works. I'll just say it. It's this simple. If you do it well, the job is yours. I don't know how else to say it. Let's go through one more example. Let's say the interviewer says to you, okay, talk to me a little bit about your experience managing people. Pause. You think to yourself, I'm going to obviously go with the management theme, the management skills theme. You think of the story, the experience, and you might answer something like this. I actually have really good experience managing people. As a landscape tradesman, we were providing lawn and garden services to residential homes, and I was overseeing the efforts of 10 hourly employees. The biggest challenge I had was actually retention of the employees. We had high turnover. You can imagine this is a tough job with low morale. And to exacerbate that problem, the other challenge was training them to a point where they could do a quality job on their own. I felt like I was always scrambling and I had to fix it. So first, I needed to reduce the time it took to onboard and train an employee. So I created work standards and documented procedures. I even made a checklist to follow that spelled out what a quality lawn looks like. On the personal side, I knew I needed to improve morale. So I tried to create an environment where people felt appreciated and part of a team. I looked for ways to spotlight and recognize positive performance. None of this cost any money. The boss on occasion let me bring in donuts, and so we would eat lunch together and enjoy each other's company. We started to take pride in our work. These were the results. The onboarding process, we were able to decrease that from 3 weeks down to 2 weeks. I went from losing 1 to 2 employees a month, and we reduced that to 1 employee every other month. This retention paid dividends. We were able to get through an extra lawn almost every day, which is a 20% increase in profits for the business owner. I consider this a huge success, and what I developed were really good management skills. Learn how to train people and hold them accountable for quality performance. I learned how to create a really good atmosphere and build a team where we improved morale and reduced our turnover. I know that you're looking to build a solid team. I've done this before, and if you give me a chance, that's the type of impact I can have on your organization. You pause, and you let it sink in, and you let them smile, because they always do when you do a good job. So let's talk about this. This is really crazy. A landscape tradesman all of a sudden became a great fit for a supervisor role overseeing a whole bunch of employees at Meluka. What was the part formula? Let's talk about it. The problem, the problem was turnover and training. The actions, we documented standards and wrote procedures, and we also did recognize, to help out on the morale, we recognized people and spotlight their positive performance. What were the results? We reduced the turnover and we reduced the time to onboard employees. And finally, the takeaway, we're saying we have great management skills. We know how to build a team, know how to improve morale and retain great talent, and that's the type of impact I can have on your organization. And that's how it works. It's the formula. I've seen many, many success stories of people going in there and proactively selling themselves. And like I said it before, if you knock it out of the park, the job is yours. Now, it takes practice to get good at this. So, I always found that when I was first learning and I was practicing, I would get paralyzed and I would find myself seized up because I would try to give out the perfect answer in my first crack. And so what I would say is this. There's no one way to do it, but here's a quick approach that I like to do. I like to have my partner, in this case it's my wife, it could be anybody, it doesn't have to be anyone with business experience, they just have to be able to give positive feedback and constructive feedback. And my wife would go through each experience and say, tell me about this experience, and then the first time I would go through it, trying to follow the part formula and sell one of the themes, I would just ramble on, and I didn't want any feedback, no criticism, and I call that my brainstorming hat. And if I didn't like my story, I wouldn't even correct it. Midway through, I would just change and go another direction, but I would just ramble, and the whole purpose of this is just exploring the territory. Then the second time, no feedback, I would think, okay, now I know how I want to answer this. I know how I want to tell my story, and I would go and try to give a good, nice answer. My wife would come back and typically say, hey, you need to tighten this up, be more concise. I really like this part of it. And so I'd go in one more third time and try to hit a home run. If it wasn't quite there, then do it a fourth or fifth. But when you're done, you're going to take out a piece of paper and just jot down bullets of your story, how you've kind of done that. It could be your problem, action, result, takeaway, and you might write out like any transition sentences that you really like. You don't want to memorize it though, just bullets. And at the end of this, when you're done, you only need 5 to 8 really good stories. And you're going to tell those stories over and over. If you have a second and a third round interview, tell the same stories. They're going to go and they're going to talk about these stories and say, yeah, I love that. I heard that too. Can you believe that she did this or he did that? Now, here's what you got to know. When the interview's done, there's a group of people that are going to sit around a table, and they're going to talk about the candidates. And the worst thing they can say is, oh, she was really nice. She was very amicable, or I like this story he told. You need them to say, wow, did you hear about her management skills? Can you believe his problem-solving skills? And you need them to talk about those skills because those are the ones meeting the requirements. So, this is the strategy. This is how it works. Let me ask you, how does it feel? I need to go through a little cheat sheet I created. I'm going to move through this incredibly fast. So you're going to probably have to go afterwards later and watch this online to get it. But this is just to help you with that last little bit of polish and preparation. So here we go. I'm telling you right now, this is on the final exam. You better hit these questions out of the park and have a home run. That first question in particular, that sets up the first impressions, and that largely determines how the rest of the interview is going to go. You may or may not get these, but they're common. As far as the weakness question goes, don't give a weakness that's like a showstopper. Pick one that's inconsequential, and also talk about how you're compensating for it. On these here, I always like to ask myself, what are they getting at? Where do I want to go with this? And then I think of the story and share it. If you can't think of a story, then you say something like this. I don't have anything off the top of my head, but in general, this is how I approach these types of situations, and then go into it. Don't forget, you are there to sell yourself. So you've got to look and spot opportunities to take every question and turn it into an opportunity to sell yourselves. Here's some of the questions you might get. There's a lot of others where you've got to take that opportunity to sell one of the 4 themes. I find that in general, half of the questions I get are the guaranteed ones and ones where I can go and sell those themes, the requirements, right? And half of them are ones that are very difficult to anticipate. And so what I found is the best way to prepare for the second half is to prepare for the first half. When you get really good at talking about yourself and sharing these stories, you get quick on your toes and you're able to manage curveballs. Another thing I'll do is I'll print off 20 top most common interview questions, and I'll just go through these. I don't try to memorize them. You're not trying to get all the answers. You're just getting good at talking about yourself. You're getting comfortable in your skin and managing questions from different angles. I'm not even going to talk about this, but I'll just tell you this much. If you don't know how to arrive on time and you don't know how to do basic research or dress the part, you probably don't deserve the job. Okay, so you'll notice at the end of my takeaways, I always like to end with a power punch, like this final statement that kind of leaves them going. And so this is a handful of ones. You can come up with others, but don't fizzle out. End abruptly with something strong, and it really punches them in the gut. So I remember when I was first going into interviews, I used to sit there and fret about choosing the right words, and I didn't feel like I was professional in my word choice, and I wasn't very articulate. And what I found, it doesn't really matter. If you can tell a good story, that creates the feeling, and nobody cares how you say it. So don't worry about that kind of stuff. If you don't feel like you're really, really good at expressing yourself, just learn to tell a good story, and that will take care of it for you. Lastly, actually second to the last, you're going to practice and practice and practice, and you want a lot of these principles to become second nature. But when you get there, there's always going to be things that you're still not comfortable with, and you're going to sit there and be thinking and analyzing, what am I supposed to do next? Let it all go. When it's game time, just be yourself. Don't try to mimic anybody else. Let your own personality come out. You don't want to mimic me or anyone else, and you don't even have to be charismatic. Some people are looking for someone who's very genuine and authentic. And so don't overanalyze it at game time. Let it all go. Be yourself, and whatever second nature, just let that come out. I can't overstate the importance of practice. I consider interviewing to be one of my strengths. And every single time I go in for a new role, major job change, I practice 4 or 5 evenings, 2 to 3 hours every evening. And by the time I'm done, I'm so sharp, I almost feel like it's guaranteed I'm going to get this job. And you know, it oftentimes plays out that way. So I cannot overstate, you've got to practice. I'd like to finish up with one last personal story. I feel like this brings together this concept of networking and interviewing as one complete package. I was living in South Carolina. My family, we had been there for well over a decade, and it was time for us to move back west. We wanted to be closer to family. And I came across a job that honestly looked like my dream job. It was an executive role overseeing the operations for a company in Utah called Mighty Light. And I looked and said, this is an opportunity to combine all of the skills and everything I've learned up to this point and go in there and build something unique and be able to have the whole operations and create the organization and the culture that I want to. This is exactly what I've always wanted. There was one problem. I was grossly underqualified. They were looking for 15 plus years of a specific type of experience, and I had 6 rounded up. The other problem was that there was 170 applicants. And in this career site, I could actually see their title and their profile. All of them dwarfed me in the number of years experience, and I can't say I went through everyone, but the vast majority I looked at, they already had executive titles of vice president and chief operating officer, and I didn't have that. And I said to myself, you know what? I know I'm an underdog here, but I gotta try for it. And so I put an application in, and 2 days later, guess what? I totally got rejected. They didn't even want to interview me. And so I had a month to stew on this. And I thought, if they had just given me an opportunity, I believe that even though I don't have the experience, I have the expertise. And I could have communicated that. I could have sold that. But I didn't get a chance to get in front of them. And then I thought, Christopher, what the heck? You've never gone through the front door to get an interview. You've always had to go through the back door. Why would this be any different? And all of a sudden I had this burst of energy. So I quickly ran online to find the job posting, and they pulled it down 2 days earlier. This was a month later. And I said, I'm not giving up. So I did research, and I found the executive search firm that was conducting the recruiting. And I did more research, and I found the president of that firm. And I sent him a personal email asking for an informational interview. He agreed. The next day, we got on the phone. We talked a little bit about the job, and I talked to him about how there was more to my resume than meets the eye, and I sold some of my expertise. The next day, he reached out to me and said, Christopher, I've got you an interview with the CEO and the executive team. And I was elated. I remember thinking, this is JP Morgan all over again. But this time, I am not going to mess this up. I'm going to get this right. I got one shot. So for 4 or 5 evenings, I practiced for hours and hours until I had so much confidence, I literally felt like I was ready to slay a dragon. So I go in there, and my first round, I absolutely hit a home run. Second round, home run. Third round, they had some concerns. I had anticipated them. I resolved them and hit a home run. And at the end of that, they extended me an offer. Now, this was so invigorating. I was ecstatic. And the last 2.5 years have been truly the most amazing experience of my career. I have an amazing team under me, very professional, and we are transforming the entire operations. We've got 3 plants in Utah, 1 in California, 1 in Tennessee, 2 in Toronto, Canada, and it has absolutely been amazing. It's been incredibly fun. But this is the point. I had no right, based on my resume, getting that job. I had no business. There was 170 candidates who all had more experience and who were all more qualified than I was, and I beat them out. How does that work? Here's the thing, I'm not special, but I followed the game plan. Let me review what it is. For my first speech, we talked about networking. We use informational interviews to create a screening interview that can turn into an official interview. I have countless of stories of BYU Idaho students that have successfully done that. Second, we execute a solid interviewing strategy. We talked about that today. I know dozens of success stories of students who have come back and told me it works. I've been mentoring for many years on this topic. And third, we maintain discipline to work hard and practice. That's how it works. Let me just ask you this right now. Are you ready to do this? Is there anything that's going to stop you from doing this? That is my message today. You can do it. I know you can do it. You might feel like you don't have the perfect experience, but you now know how to sell your skills. You just have to get started. Identify your 4 requirements. Link each of your experience to those themes. Then tell a really good story. Share an example using the PART formula that illustrates those skills in action. I recently talked, this was just literally the other week, to one of the head recruiters at Walmart. And I asked him, I said, why are you recruiting so many BYU Idaho students? You know what he told me? He said, BYU Idaho students, they take initiative. They're scrappy and they're innovative. They don't wait for the job to come to them. They go get the job. What I want to tell you, this is who we are. This is our identity. Own it. Carry that flag with pride. I do. I'm proud of my heritage. Do not play defense. We are scrappy. Go take the offense. Go sell yourself. I know you can do it. Thank you so much for letting me come speak with you today. Thank you.